All right, welcome everyone to the latest ASRG webinar. Today we have with us Christos from the University of Memphis. He's going to be talking to us about extracting personable identifiable information, and I'm sure I said that wrong, from infotainment systems. He, together with his colleagues who are also joining, they'll be available also to ask some questions at the end. Just as a quick note here, there is a way to add your questions to the chats. On the right-hand side, there's this Q&A button. And if you have questions during the presentation, please go ahead, post your question in the sidebar, which is Q&A, and you'll see the other questions from other people um, who probably have the same questions like you. You can upvote and downvote these questions to make them more important, so Christos and his colleagues can answer them in the best possible way later on. So, without further ado, Christos, thank you very much for being here with us today. We're very excited for your presentation and the information you're going to share with us.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much, and thanks to both you and Rena for organizing the event. So hi everyone. I'm Christos Papadopoulos. I'm a professor at the University of Memphis, as John said, and this is work that we've done with my co-conspirators, Sam Lozon and Spiros Thanasoulas. Spiros is also from the University of Memphis. They are both pen testers, and Sam, at least I know, has a lot of experience doing pen testing in automotive, and Spiros too. So a lot of the work that you will see here is work that they have done. All right, let me see now how to switch slides. I think I may have to go to the other. Okay. All right, before I start, let me put a plug for another ASRG SOS presentation that happened earlier in September. This presentation was done by Richard Harding. He's a digital forensics student at the University of South Wales. And the title is here. So he did something fairly similar. He investigated retrievable PII from a Mercedes IVI module. So in some sense, we do something pretty similar. So Richard presented at the last meeting. He also covered some EU regulations that we do not cover. He also used open source tools to pull the storage image out of the unit and analyze it. And I do encourage you to watch it. It was really nice work, and I think it complements nicely what we do here. The differences with our work are as follows. We analyze data from older units. The unit that Richard analyzed was a more recent unit. I think it was in vehicles as recently as maybe 3 or 4 years ago. His was a Mercedes. We analyzed a couple of radios from BMW and one from a Jeep vehicle. In our case, we did not have to power up the units, unlike what Richard did. He powered up his unit and let it authenticate, and then he pulled the image out. In our case, we pull the image passively without powering up the units, and you'll see how. And we do not cover any of the regulatory space. So I do not feel able or qualified to talk about regulations, so we skip that. All right, very briefly, we do get personally identifiable information in infotainment systems, and this gets in there when we connect our phones, either through Android Auto, CarPlay, or some of the other apps. Sometimes information gets in there via Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, and the information can include contact lists from connected phones. It can include locations we visited, especially if the car is equipped with GPS, as most of the cars these days are, and lots of other things that can be considered PII. This information is typically collected and retained for occupant convenience, right? So we want our car to know who is on our contact list. So when we tell our car to call, mom, for example, the car knows what number to call and so forth. So that information is used to track recent calls, recall visited locations, or songs, contacts, and so forth. And it's needed there to integrate with our existing vehicle UIs. Now, recently, a few articles appeared in the news, most notably a couple of articles in the New York Times by this particular reporter. I think her name is Kashmir Hill, and she published two articles. One was about automakers sharing consumer driving behavior with insurance companies. That was the LexisNexis and OnStar story, if you guys have read it. If not, it's interesting. I encourage you to read it. And then she did a follow-on article when she discovered that information from her Chevy Bolt was actually being transmitted to the cloud too. And then there was a Mozilla Foundation study, and the title of the study was Cars Are Privacy Nightmares. That was last year in September. And the point here is that articles about privacy and about PII in vehicles are beginning to make their way into the popular press and popular websites. So potentially the public is seeing these stories, and it gets an opportunity to learn about PII in vehicles. It's not quite clear how much impact these stories are having yet, but clearly they're beginning to show. A little bit about the Mozilla Foundation study. So they concluded in a little bit of a sensational fashion that all new cars today are privacy nightmares on wheels that collect huge amounts of personal information. Let me just say a little bit about the methodology they used. So the methodology was essentially reading and evaluating publicly available privacy documents provided by each company. So they read all the fine print that we have to sign when we buy vehicles. And that included privacy policies, privacy pages, FAQs. And this was done in an attempt to determine what kind of information is generally collected, how the data is used by the company, how you can control your data, the known track record of a company in terms of protecting data, if the product can be used online, and whether the privacy policy is user-friendly. And to summarize our findings, it's a long report, so I'm not claiming by any means to be complete here, but here are some of the findings that they found. So data is being gathered by sensors, microphones, cameras, and phones. Many car brands engage in privacy washing. There is no meaningful consent, really. People typically sign these documents without even reading them because they're just too big, and there's no way somebody can read these documents. The privacy policies and processes, they decided they're especially bad, and then car brands share personal information with law enforcement. Data breaches are common, I think we know that. And finally, consumers have very little control. Okay, so these studies, both in the New York Times story and the Mozilla study, they don't really answer a specific question, which is what data is actually stored in a vehicle? Just because we can read about data that can be potentially collected, as the Mozilla Foundation discovered, it doesn't really mean that automakers do collect that kind of data. Those documents are typically written by legal teams, and they try to cover all possible cases, but it doesn't really mean that they actually collect the data. So what data is stored? Where is it stored? How much of that data is actually PII? And how hard is it to extract that information? And when we say how hard, we mean how much time, how much skill, and how much effort does it take to extract the data? And then once we extract PII from a car, how much additional PII can we extrapolate using external resources? Things that we know about cars that are not in the car. So this is where our work begins. Now, there's a lot of existing work in breaking into car modules and extracting data. I refer you to the Tesla autopilot work, for example. That's a great example of sophisticated hackery, if you like. And that work is done by experts. I would call these extreme hacks. And if you read how they were done, using voltage glitching and so forth, it takes a lot of effort, time, and skill to do these. And they're great. They're great pieces of work. They're very fun to read. What we do, however, we sort of go the other side. We ask the question, how can we maximize PII extraction from a car with minimal effort while minimizing the effort? So we don't want to climb Kilimanjaro. We just want to climb a much, much smaller mountain here and see what we can get with as little effort as possible. Now, why do that? Besides the fact that it's interesting and we want to know, we believe that this type of work can help when you create appropriate risk models. So, for example, companies always try to build risk models around all their processes. We think it would be good for them to know how easy would it be to extract that information and take that into account. All right, a few caveats. We do look at older systems. These are 10-plus-year-old systems, and the only reason is that we just didn't want to spend a lot of money buying radios from newer systems. But these are systems from cars that many of them are still around, and they're still on our streets. We extract PII from systems that do not need to power on. This sort of rhymes with our mantra, which was to try to minimize the effort that we expend. And finally, we examined only 3 radios here. 2 of them were actually from BMWs, and 1 of them was from a Jeep. We have other radios, but we'll talk about just these 3 on this presentation. So what do we do? Well, our journey starts, like many similar journeys start, by buying a used radio on eBay. And on the right, you can see the radio that we bought. We paid $60, and there's some information about it on the eBay listing. You can see, for example, the year, model, cars that it fits. And what's interesting here is that we know it's a BMW, we know it's the F30 chassis, and somewhere in there, there's a VIN. And I'll say a little more about that one. But I wanted to point out that a lot of these listings do list the VIN. So we bought the radio, then we applied basic digital forensic techniques to extract information from it. And the goal was to extract all the information we can and then see how much of it, what of it is PII, and go from there. So how easy was it, and what did we learn? So here's the radio that we got when it arrived. As you can see, we didn't have any face plates. It does not look very pretty. You can see the CD or DVD input, if you like. But you can also see that cover with the 2 screws on the front. And that's, I'm not going to say secured, but there's a little white tag that's on top of it, a tamper-proof tag. I mean, that's not a security feature, obviously. So we removed it. It was very easy, obviously. It was secured by only 2 Torx T8 screws. Even somebody who doesn't know what the Torx screw is can Google it, figure it out, get the right screwdriver, and the hard drive is out. What we did find was an 80 gig IDE 2.5-inch hard drive. So far, everything was really easy. Then we imaged the hard drive. And we can easily do this. Just bought a $20 ID to USB adapter from Amazon, connected the hard drive to a Linux laptop. The hard drive was instantly recognized. And then for those of you who have some forensic experience or file system experience, we just use DD, the most basic command, to image the hard drive. Now we have the entire image on the laptop. We called it CIC.img, and some of you may have already recognized that in that year, for that model BMW, the infotainment system was a CIC system. Difficulty in doing this? Pretty easy. Then we used another standard command, fdisk-l, and that command gave us the whole partition. You can see it on the right. And we discovered that these partitions were QNX6 compatible. We didn't want to say definitely that they were QNX6 because sometimes our tools can potentially lie to us. But right now, at this point, we have all the partitions that were in the hard drive that we imaged. All right, then we extracted the partitions. We used a Python script, easily found on the internet, to extract each partition of the recovered image into its individual components. This particular script reads the MBR, or the master boot record, and any extended partition information, converts it from cylinder head sector to blocks, and then creates files based on offsets. There's other ways to do this, but this was a pretty easy way to do this. And you can see the partitions on the right with their sizes. First thing we did, like any forensics investigator, and this is what I teach students in my forensics class, the easiest thing you can do is use the strings command to see if there's anything readable on the image that you're examining. For those of you who are not familiar with the strings command, it simply takes input, a bit input, can be anything, it doesn't care, and then it tries to print all the ASCII characters. Anything that's printable, it will print it on the screen. And forensics investigators know that there's a lot of good information to be found if you, in any particular image that are there in plain ASCII. So, as you can imagine, it was 80 gigabytes of data. So we started scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And eventually we came across a list of songs that apparently were played on the radio. And you can see a sample here. There were many, many songs. It looks like this particular radio was keeping track of virtually every song that was playing on the radio. Now, what can we learn, if anything, from this? Well, by looking at the songs, you can potentially identify things such as gender, maybe the age group, maybe culture background. You see what the particular person was playing, and then maybe you can even separate these songs into categories, and maybe you can determine how many people were using the radio. Maybe you can separate the younger people, the older people, and so forth. So nothing particularly dangerous, but we're sort of beginning to get some idea of who the occupants, some things about the occupants, and at least what they have in terms of a taste of music. So we kept scrolling and scrolling. We're still doing the string command. We're still looking for printable stuff. And now things are getting a little more interesting. We came across email addresses. Again, lots of scrolling, but we were rewarded with a whole bunch of email addresses that apparently were used on the radio. So now we're getting closer to PII because email addresses are definitely PII. So here we are. The next thing we wanted to do is extract files. So recall that so far we did everything using partitions. So the next level is to go into these partitions and extract files. Now, can we do this, and how easy is it? So we used another Python script. You can see where we got it from, it's online. And then we modified it a little bit, and that script gave us a list of files with file names that were on these partitions. So in this particular case, we picked one partition, CIC image 1, and we showing the information for that partition. All right, so when we extracted the data, again, looking at file names, one of them was called contact book, something else, .db, which is clearly an SQLite database. And if you run it through an SQLite reader, then we are now beginning to see names, addresses, phone numbers, and so forth. So clearly now we're getting a lot more PII because we've hit the contact list of the of whoever paired phones with this particular car. Was this difficult? Well, we would say maybe easy to moderate. Somebody has to understand how to use SQLite. Somebody recognizing the contact book, I think, is not that hard. It's in the name. But it does require a little bit of expertise using SQLite, but we would definitely not call that hard. Then we decided to find out more information about the car. So we're all familiar with VIN, the vehicle identification number. And what we discovered is some digits in the image that look suspiciously like the last 7 digits of the VIN. And those of you who are familiar with VINs, you know that that's the vehicle serial number. We also know that each particular company has a format for their VIN, how they format it, and then different digits mean different things. But now we have the last 7 digits, we have the format, and we can use that to try to decode the VIN. So in this particular case, we're showing how to decode the BMW VIN. And we're showing the information that we already know. For example, this is an F30 vehicle. We know the restraint system that that the vehicle has. We can find that from the NHTSA website. And therefore, we're allowed to guess one of the digits. We know the model year. It's 2013 or later. We can determine the plant code, the plant where the vehicle was made, because there's only a few options, and we learned that from Wikipedia. And we already have the last 7 digits. So with that information, we try creating a set of plausible VIN entries that might fit this particular radio. So by process of elimination, we go through a set of different options, and eventually we end up with numbers, VINs that are plausible. Is this difficult? Well, you need to learn a little bit about the structure of how VINs are formatted, try to understand them, but I would really not call that particularly difficult. So we'll classify that as moderate in terms of difficult. What was interesting is that we did find the right VIN for the car, and we also determined that even though a VIN was listed on the eBay listing, it was the wrong VIN. We were able to find the right VIN using this process and determine that whoever listed the car, they just had the wrong VIN. There's other vehicle information that we can find, and these are all available on the web. So once you have the VIN, then there's so much other information that is keyed on the VIN. For example, for BMWs, you can find the different options that the particular car came with from the factory. And we show the website where you can go do that. And once you have the VIN, again, you can even find the scrapper option. You can find where the car was sold. And because in this particular case, this car was wrecked and then it was sold. So again, very easy search, and here is the car. I'm sure a lot of you have already done this, or you know how to do this. The company is Copart, and if you're into looking at scrap vehicles at all, then you're very familiar with this company. So here's the car, we have pictures of it, and we have other information, and we can also verify the VIN that we found earlier. But one key point is that now we know where the car was sold. And it was sold in California, in San Bernardino. So that gives us yet another hint as to where the owners might be located. So as we said earlier, we did find the owner's contact list, and it does contain names, phone numbers, email addresses, physical addresses, and so forth. And then the question becomes, what can we deduce about the owner from the contact list? And here's information that we can get. So we know where they get their nails done. We know where they get their medicine. We know who the dermatologist is, the general practitioner, dentist, what church they go, what theater they follow, and so forth. And you know, as we said before, we even know what type of things they like to hear. Now, this is beginning to get a little close to, in terms of information about the owner. I suspect that a number of people might not feel comfortable if we presented them with information like this that was recovered from their wrecked car. And extrapolating, we think that, we're not sure. This is, again, using the process of deduction. We think that this might be their car. There was no home entry in the radio, so we had to extrapolate that. So apologies for trying to blur the house, but just to show that yet another thing that we can potentially do. Okay. All right. So what else can we find about from the vehicle about the owners or about the devices that the owners were using? So we're now shifting to the image that we got from the Jeep, but we could do that just as well as with the other images. And here, it's worth noting that when you plug a phone with a USB cable on your radio, then your device, your radio, scans for media files. And this is obvious why, right? So the radio wants to know what songs you have available on your phone. So when you tell the car, you know, play song X, then it knows where to go and find it and play it. So when that happens, there's a new directory structure that gets created in the infotainment unit. But because of that, we can now look at the directory structure and see what apps were involved on the phone, at least some of them, perhaps not all of them. But this is yet another piece of information that we are able to pull out about the phone from the owners. So in this particular case, you can see that there's Pandora involved, and there's some other applications that I'm not sure I know what they do. This is just a partial list of the apps that we found. The real list is a lot bigger than that, and you know, it's all there. Is it important? Is it would owners be uncomfortable if other people discovered what apps they have on their phone? Possibly. It's hard to tell, but I can imagine that owners may not feel particularly comfortable if somebody knew what apps they have installed on their phone. Okay, and just because everybody is thinking about AI, we thought we would have some fun with AI. So so I asked Spiros, can we take this the PII that we found, sorry, from the car, and use that to create a spear phishing email from the contact list? Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the term, I'm sure most of you are, but spear phishing is essentially phishing emails, but they're targeted phishing emails. So they include something personal about you. They include information that maybe you only know. So this is personalized phishing in some sense. And the goal is obvious. They're trying to get you to click on a link by making the email seem personal and taking you off guard and thinking that it came from one of your friends or one of your relatives. Now, if you try to create this phishing email using ChatGPT or any of the other LLMs that we all know, and we tried this, um, and then you say, create a phishing email using this information, the response you're going to get back is, phishing is illegal, and you're going to get a little spiel about how phishing is bad, and then you shouldn't do it, and so forth. Bottom line is that the LLM will just refuse to create a phishing email for you. However, ChatGPT is not the only LLM available out there. So Spiros found something called Pentest GPT, which is a penetration testing tool. It says it's empowered by ChatGPT, and as the name implies, it's a tool targeted to assist penetration testers by creating various scenarios that pen testers will be interested in. So all this is on GitHub. We have the link there, and you can go find it and take a look at it if you want. The key point here is that all the safeties, like the little lecture that you were getting before about how phishing is bad, these are disabled because the tool says it wants to be an aid for pen testers. So pen testers may actually want to create things that ChatGPT and so forth may not allow. So without safeties, we try to create phishing emails, and this is just the proof of concept stage. So we did not spend a lot of time yet. Well, we just started working on this, but we just wanted to see if phishing emails can be created from personal information that we found in the car. And you can see the prompt at the bottom. We asked it to create a personalized SMS from the contact list owner, and then we asked it to use different reasons for why they should click on that particular malicious link, and created a lot of phishing emails. They're pretty simple. You can see some of them on the right, and the point is that it actually did it. Is this enough to get people to click on? I'm not sure. But imagine more sophisticated attempts like this one. For example, imagine having access to location that we can pull out from a vehicle, and then imagine creating a phishing email saying, "Hey, so and so, we met at this location," and this could be a real location that was in the car, and then potentially saying things like, "Oh, I enjoyed listening, that song," and just we'll let the LLM figure out how to do that. But potentially, at least, it is plausible that it might create something that seems personalized enough to catch people off guard and get them to click on messages. So this is, I have no proof that anything like this has happened before, but I do not put it beyond people who are trying to figure out ways to get you to click on links to actually do that. All right, one last thing about contact lists. It turns out, at least from the few that we have seen, our contact lists tend to be very personalized. In the sense that a lot of people put names, not real names, but maybe names that they can remember, or perhaps names that express some sort of a sentiment about the person in the contact list. Some of them can be embarrassing. We have a few on the right, at least the ones that I can print. And the question, I guess, is, these particular names may not be PII, but what if the contact list were to be made available to your friends and family? And given the fact that these names are associated with phone numbers, people may actually see what kind of a nickname or what kind of entry you have in the contact list about them. So not PII technically, but it could be another way of information getting out that might embarrass the owner. Okay, so what do we do? Let's recap, and then we'll wrap it up in a few more slides. So we started by buying radios on eBay. We use basic forensics tools to extract information. We bypassed any radio security requirements. So no passwords, no other credentials are needed because these radios typically power on when you get in the car, but obviously we didn't have to do that. We bypassed any security offered by the car, simply because we didn't have to power the car. No key needed, no PIN we need to enter, and so forth. We didn't even have to activate the radio. Then we correlated the data we discovered with external sources and that allowed us to deduce a significant amount of PII about previous owners. And previous owners are not aware of this, but the car was crushed. They left their hands. They probably didn't even have a chance to do anything from the car. Maybe not even pick up their belongings. Maybe they got them from the insurance. But even if they were aware of this, there's really not much that they could do. The radio was sold on eBay. Nobody tried to clear the information. They don't even know that this happened. Let me quickly point out to some regulations that might be related to all this. I think there's an extensive list of regulations on privacyforcars.com if you wanted to look at that. But a lot of the regulations that we saw contain very general language, covering breaches, deleting information when no longer lawfully required. Not sure what that means. So it's not clear how much applies to vehicles already. There is one regulation that we found that seems directly related to this. This is from Illinois, and this is a state law that requires companies that repossess vehicles to clear, erase, and delete otherwise eliminate personal information when they repossess a car. I think there may be similar regulations in other states, but the point here is that on the regulatory space, we don't really have much, although there seemed to be some indication that some regulations are beginning to emerge. And in this particular case, this one only covers cars that were repossessed. So, conclusions. We believe that vehicle infotainment systems do collect significant PII, and that's probably right because it adds a lot of convenience to occupants, although it does increase risk of exposure of PII. These are typically stored on hard drives or SSDs. So far, we haven't found any that are encrypted. I'm sure they're out there. And if they're not encrypted, they seem pretty easy to extract. Contact lists obviously are a gold mine, and I don't think we can say a lot more than that. They really are. The car ecosystem publishes substantial external data that is related to vehicles. There's a lot of stuff associated with the VIN, and we need that stuff. We need to be able to track a vehicle, track the service records, the Carfax records, for example. We need to be able to verify mileage. We need to be able to track title transfers, and so forth. We need to know about the vehicle configuration because we need to order the right parts. And then the the auction scraper websites need that information to track vehicles. However, there is a significant lack of awareness among the public about what information is stored in cars. The public seems to be much better aware when it comes to PII in cell phones, because I think by now most people know that if you trade in a phone, you have to do a factory reset. And most companies that will take your phone back, they tell you how to do a factory reset. But I don't think they know how to do that with cars, even though I believe there's ways to clear the information from a car if you really wanted to. The problem, of course, is that you may not get the opportunity to do that. So what can be done? Right now, if the vehicle leaves the owner's hands, there's really no way for the owner to discover and erase all PII. So the vehicle gets sold, or the vehicle is in an accident and it gets towed to an impound, if it's retired, if it gets stolen, and so forth. So perhaps what we need, one idea, might be to have the ability to do a factory reset that is analogous to cell phones. Again, many units probably have that, so maybe not a factory reset, but a way to erase data. But again, what if the vehicle has no power? There's no power to erase anything. What if the unit is damaged or inactive? And what if it needs to be done remotely in case of theft? So, do we need the ability to do this by a tool that perhaps supplies power externally to the vehicle and only activates parts of the unit that need to be activated to do a reset? And finally, do we need to reevaluate how VINs are used in the ecosystem? This reminds me of several years ago when we discovered that Social Security numbers were being a nightmare because so much information was assigned to a Social Security number. We seem to be doing similar things with VINs. So is it time to rethink that? And of course, at the very end is the question becomes: do people care? You know, if we go to them with this information, how many people care? How many people will be willing to pay a little extra to get a car that does better with PII and so forth? And that's an open question. Okay, let me just leave you with a quote from Sam that I think tries to capture some of the state of affairs. And what he said, this PII that's in vehicles is just an incidental byproduct of trying to make things user friendly. I think there's a lot of truth into that. Okay, so let me stop here, and I will hand it back to John and see if there's any questions that we need to answer.
Can you hear me now, Christos?
Yes.
There we go. So first of all, thank you very much for a great presentation. Actually, it's really interesting to see, the steps that people go through to, extract this type of data or to understand how easy this is. Especially, then other people can do the same thing, right? And then reproduce and then understand how to do it best. So thank you very much for the great presentation. I do have at least one question in the chat so far. Here comes another one. The question is, first of all, from myself. I'll put it directly on the stage. Have you done investigations with newer vehicles? Because older vehicles, yes, of course, we weren't quite thinking about privacy 10, 20 years ago. And do you see that newer vehicles might include additional measures to protect the owners? Or are we kind of in the same situation as always?
Yeah, so we as I said, we did not look at newer vehicles simply because we didn't have funds to purchase units from newer vehicles. But I will refer you to the other SOS presentation by Richard, who has looked at a much newer unit. And if I remember correctly, he used very similar techniques to image the disk. The only thing he had to do that you might say was an additional security measure is that he had to power up the unit let the storage be authenticated, and then he swapped the SATA cables from the unit to his laptop, and then he imaged the information. So all that, so the information was still in the clear. So all he had to do is sort of trick the unit to release the storage and the information in the storage, and then he was able to do pretty much what we did. In another unit that we have a Nissan unit, and that one seems to require a password for the hard drive to be released. We're still working on that one, but as Sam pointed out to you, he said, I wouldn't be surprised if the password is common across all Nissan radios, because we all know that a lot of bad coding when it comes to these devices happens when the same password is being used across the board, right? So we'll see what we found with that one. But the indication so far, at least 5 or 8 years later, looking at what Richard did, is that yes, there's some authentication to unlock the radio, but the information is still accessible.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir. We do have, it looks like one more. Actually, there's two different entries here. I believe that this is not really a question, but it largely, I think it's trying to answer my previous question. But newer vehicles are generally starting to improve stronger security measures. For example, recent GM vehicles now use Android Automotive, which includes encryption for user data at rest.
So that's actually great to hear.
Right. So there is one more question here, Christos. This is coming from David. Can you please say more about the availability of forensic tools to support the kind of work that you conducted? You mentioned open source tools and adapting some of the tools. How can researchers become aware of and access such tools?
Yeah, thank you, David. So these tools are fairly common. So as I mentioned at some point, we teach forensic students how about the tools, what they are, what the capabilities are, and how to use them. So and if someone really wanted to learn about these tools, it's very easy. The information is online. You can watch a few YouTube videos and learn how to do this. So one important thing that we can do is make people aware of these tools, and maybe even provide the tools and tutorials on how to use them. And we actually do that through another project that I'm part of. It's called Pivot. David talked about it on an ASRG presentation back in September. And we can help people who want to learn more about this become familiar with them. The thing it's not clear that we can do. I would love to be able to provide images from hard drives to researchers who do privacy research, and so they have data, they have something to work with to evaluate privacy and try to develop new privacy techniques. That gets a little bit tricky because the data that we are talking about has PII in it. So we need to find ways of how to best distribute that type of data in a controlled fashion while still allowing researchers to do meaningful work with these images. That's something we're looking at.
All right, great. Are there any more questions from the audience? I think, Christos, when we're talking about privacy, and I'm always concerned about connecting my vehicle Bluetooth with my rental car or whatever, because as you can imagine, a rental car is like a swimming pool worth of privacy-related data that's unprotected. So I think from a user's perspective, we should still be a little bit cautious about where we connect our devices and what type of data we're enabling to be sent somewhere. But we don't have so much control over this. I mean, it's not like we can say I only connect Bluetooth for calling. I don't want to share my contact related data. Maybe it's
That's
also
right.
on the device side is what I mean, that we need measures.
That's right. That's right. With rental cars, I think there's been some proposals. For example, maybe rental car companies should be required to clear up the entries before they rent the car to the next person. But I'm sure people in your audience will identify with a little thing that happened to me. We rented a car. We tried to connect a phone to the Bluetooth through Bluetooth to the car, and would refuse to do that. And we actually, there was a bunch of computer science people, and we were all getting embarrassed because we couldn't debug the problem until somebody had the bright idea to say, well, let's see how many phones have been paired before. Maybe the entries are full. And that's exactly what it was. The car was filled up with entries from previous owners, from previous people who rented the car, and it would not accept a new phone until we cleared the old entries. So just a little thing to show that people are really not aware of what's going on between their phones and the car.
All right. And is there a place where we can find more information about these types of privacy related topics in automotive?
Absolutely. So my email is on the first slide. So feel free to email me, and I can connect you with people in the community. I mentioned Privacy for Cars as another website, but I'll be happy to talk to anyone in person if they're interested in doing this.
Great, Christos. We don't have any further questions. So if you don't have any further points, or I would go ahead and end the webinar. Would you like to say anything before we end today's webinar?
Nope, just wanted to thank everybody for attending. I wanted to thank Sam and Spears again for helping me out. I hope that, so again, my goal was not to blame automakers or anybody else. I mean, I think that Sam's code is right. We do trade convenience for privacy. All we're trying to do is increase awareness and make sure people know what it is that happens. So when do they connect the phone to the car? So I think transparency is important. That's all we're trying to do here, and showing people in simple terms and how easy it is to do this. I think that can benefit the consumer. And who knows? Maybe we'll get better privacy in vehicles at the end.
Definitely. I think this is a goal from everyone. The introducing new functions and features into a vehicle is, of course, creating a competitive advantage for that product on the market. But there's this cybersecurity stuff we also have to be careful of, right? And the more features and functions we add to the vehicle, well, at some point we do need to add the cybersecurity in there. And there's always this cross section about, okay, making things more easy and making things more secure. And you don't know exactly where the fine line is of what's considered acceptable, right? So it's very difficult to. The most secure car has no electronic functions, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah, I think people will always want the new features, the new convenience that comes with cars, and in cybersecurity, we'll be playing catch up. But I don't see any other way of doing this.
sounds great, sir. Well, thank you so much for your time today and the presentation here at ASRG Webinars. We're looking forward to the next webinars coming up in the next few weeks. Check us out, ASRG YouTube. I put the link in the chat box, and please feel free to reach out to ASRG as well. Talk to you guys later. Thank you for joining. Have a good evening.
Thank you.